from others who were in crisis so that by the time I encountered one, I was not totally without rationality. And I learned in that crisis that helped me develop some more resilience because it required me to rely on my resources, and it required me to keep a level head. And as much as I wanted to freak out, as much as I wanted to cry, when my son came to, I was the rock for him. I was the advocate. So I needed to keep in that state of mind so that I could learn from this should it ever happen again. So that if anything were to happen with other children or other loved ones, but I was able to do that only because I've seen other people do things like that, and I've learned from past experiences through reflection.
Hi, I'm Elayna.
And I'm Marissa.
Thanks for joining us.
Let's dive into another exciting episode of Everything is Learning.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Welcome back, Mimi.
Thanks.
You're here.
Me too. It was great last time.
I know. I had so much fun last time. I loved. It was just fun. It was fun and it was funny and I enjoyed it. So I'm glad you're back.
Who knew that there was still stuff to learn about each other after 30 plus years together?
I know. You know what? If you asked me my age right now, I would have to ask my husband. I still don't know. All you can figure it out.
21 for the, 14th time?
Yeah. I don't mind getting older, in all honesty. Do you care about getting older? I don't know. I love getting older.
No, it's kind of a privilege. Yeah. I mean, my body doesn't feel as great, but it is. It's a luxury, per se.
Yeah, I hear you. I was thinking about our last conversation. We kind of went down this rabbit hole of like overcoming and working through self-doubt and authenticity and understanding ourselves. And we were led to like ideas of pivoting and building pivot and building resiliency. And it started to make me think about like how we take away on our learning journeys, how we take away skills in how we continue to learn and continue to grow, and what that looks like what are the critical components of continuous growth and kind of learning through challenging situations and crisis and in all of those types of things. So
sure.
I don't know. What do you think?
Well, when we ended last time and we started picking up talking about resilience, it got my brain working and thinking about what does that mean or look like to me. And the touch points from last time that also carry over to this is I see resilience as vulnerability and reflection, but coupled with authenticity, but it also enables you to remain like the capacity to be resilient. You have to remain rational when encountering challenging situations. And doing so requires your brain to be in a state of executive functioning and where that takes place. And I think about that because it's a critical element of how I engaged both as a teacher, but also as a parent. And, for me, the best example or way I envision executive functioning, because like that concept, even metacognition, right? Learning about learning, this is really out there. It's a concept that's not easy to wrap your mind around. So I see executive functioning like a ninja master. It helps you manage your thoughts, emotions, and actions and like get you to achieve your goals because you're able to remain rational. So I think like Mr. Miyagi. Yes. Yes. Very much so.
Virtually, and I saw Mr. Miyagi and I'm just like Miyagi. Like,
yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, he's like coaching me in my mind to keep me in a rational state where I can absorb information, because if I'm doing something emotionally, it's like all the different organs in my body are taking over and my brain isn't the primary one that's being able to focus and learn and absorb. So I don't think that. And that's where reflection plays a key piece to resilience, because it's not that I never get in these emotional or baser levels of of functioning, but like cognitive functioning, but it's just more that when I'm building resilience, if my ninja master Miyagi can help me remain rational, I can make better decisions or thoughtful decisions because I'm not in the moment like so worked up. I can take a breath and think through what should be the next action. But, as
Right.
far as executive functioning goes, as a teacher, I'm sure you have experience with this. What are your thoughts about that? Is it a ninja master? Is it you as a learning mentor?
Good question. Um, hmm. I love that. I love Miyagi. So like Mr. Miyagi, and if you're not sure who we're talking about from Karate Kid, which our father made us watch like 5,000 times. It was a good movie that like in a good series. And I'm currently I was watching Cobra Kai like
Oh,
with
sure,
my
yeah.
husband the other day. So like it just continues. Like I think he's one of the best educators of all time, or learning mentors of all time, Mr. Miyagi. But when you talk about executive functioning, I mean, that's really what I'm doing now, right? As an executive functioning coach is I'm I think of executive functioning as this beautiful thing that people it just seems like it's in the ether all the time, but people don't really know what it is. And
Yeah.
it's so critical for learning. It's critical for functioning, but I kind of see it as like being the conductor of your own personal orchestra. Like you've got the strings and the woodwinds and the brass and the
Oh,
percussion instruments, and like there's the audience and the light and sound producers and the front of house and the back of house, and etc. Like there's so many elements going on in your brain at all times.
what a
And
cool
as the
metaphor.
conductor, oh thanks. It's just I like the idea of being a conductor because I think it's this beautiful mastery of like when you look at a conductor, it's like organized chaos. And I just think it's so beautiful to watch what comes of it when you are the conductor and you know yourself. And when you're coordinating your thoughts and actions and emotions, when you're talking about when challenging things arise, you're ensuring that everything stays in sync and like the notes and the melody continue, and you have to be able to adapt as needed. And I think without it, even the best skills just become chaotic. So
Hmm.
when I think of like when I explain to learners and I explain to parents or whoever who's like what really is executive functioning? I really like to say like it acts as like the control center, like the brain's control center. It's like essential for managing thoughts and emotions and actions and learning. But I like to use the phrase like it's brain love, it's brain understanding, it's self love, it's self understanding. And if somebody told young Elayna that, young Elayna would not have had so many issues in my academic career that slowed me down, but also in life in general. And I'm still like executive functioning is with you always. Your brain is with you always. And
Yeah.
I'm
A
still
friend.
practicing all of these pieces. Yeah, you have to befriend your brain. Like you have to learn to understand it because if you don't, you're just constantly living in chaos.
Hmm.
So when I think about executive functioning and people are like, okay, like what does it really mean? Like I talk about like attention, problem solving, organization planning, working memory, like regulation. I talk about those things. And like when I say
Sound like a
attention, I mean,
robot.
yeah. Okay. So like, let's think of it like that, like parts of a person, right? So if you're sitting in your office or you're in a meeting or you're at a doctor's appointment or you're I don't give me some other examples like in a classroom or you're like what other situations are
Driving.
driving driving's a great one, shopping, like literally in all things your executive functioning is like your ability to attend. So it's like sustaining your attention, but also shifting your attention. It's
Mm.
problem solving, like identifying the problem or idea or the item that needs solving. And it's not negative. Problem solving is not necessarily negative. It's like finding a different path to get to where you're going. And like
Yeah, sure.
organization is like verifying the information that you're taking in and checking it over and then finding ways to actually prioritize, organize, etc. Planning, which is
Well,
like my favorite.
the fact that it's also unique to each person, because so I used to struggle because I'm very type A and I want something done. I also know how to do it. So a lot of times I won't delegate. I'll just take the work on myself because I know exactly what needs to get done and how I would do it. And I had a hard time
Yeah.
relinquishing the control over someone else doing that. But like you said, problem solving isn't necessarily a bad thing. And it's like putting pieces of a puzzle together. But the way in which I would do it, which is outside edges and then inside by color, is not, if someone, my best friend, if they find color pieces that match, they'll do that way. That's how they'll do it. Or like, oh, there's a person in this, let me do the person first. And it used to irritate me, but ultimately it's the same end goal. The puzzle's going to get built. Doesn't have to be my way.
Right. Well, and you're also kind of talking about like flexibility. So like shifting when plans don't initially pan out, like, or
Oh, sure.
pivoting. Love that word.
Yes.
Um, and then you're also talking about self-control. And I think a lot of confusion around self-control and regulation is really interesting too, because um self-control to me is like harnessing and understanding your impulsivity. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that sometimes people don't understand that. And they think when we talk about regulation to me, I think of like a volume dial. Like, so there's emotional, social, and behavioral regulation. And I think of it as leveling it out. When I think of executive functioning, I think of it as, like I was talking about, like the conductor of an orchestra. I don't think it's bad. I don't like to use the word control. And I did just use self-control, but I think of self-control as harnessing and understanding your impulsivity. It's all about self-love. It's all about understanding your brain and accepting your brain and loving your brain and loving yourself. And I think that's the thing about executive functioning that people don't want to understand, is that so often people are labeled with something that seems like a deficiency. And
Oh, sure.
I hate that. Executive functioning, like I've told you before, I love a good reframe. Like, I think when I first learned about executive functioning, that it was very overwhelming. I couldn't really understand it. I couldn't find a sense of control in it. And then when I relinquished it, all of a sudden, beautiful things started happening, and understanding came in, and compassion came in, and vulnerability came in. And I think those are the keys to unlocking executive functioning that
And
I
they're
don't
critical
think a lot
building
of
blocks.
people understand. Yes,
Well,
they're
sure.
building.
Yeah, to resiliency, like absolutely. Everything you said makes a ton of sense. I just wish, you were talking about impulsivity, a younger Marissa versus now. The impulsivity piece has changed it a lot for me.
Yeah. I
It
I I
has.
love, yeah, it's true. It's true. There are certain memories that came up from childhood where I was just like, yes.
The ghost in the green shoes. Like, let me tell you. So, it happens to be the time of year when we're recording this is fall, and I like the fall. I just don't really like Halloween. I'm not super into scary things. Like, we're talking about brain and learning and executive functioning, and I don't need. There's enough scary stuff in my life that I don't need someone like inserting other crazy, creepy, scary ideas. Like,
Yeah.
my brain can do that on its own. Anyway, with that said, um, like impulsivity wise, Elayna and some friends used to trick me. There was a wet sidewalk and somebody had like put their footprints in it, and they convinced me that there was like this ghost in the green shoes. I don't even know why green shoes. I think that made it more real for me because they were like a color, and I was freaked out, and I did not have executive functioning in that moment. If anything, I had executive dysfunctioning where I was flight, fright, or freeze. And I think I did all three of those. I couldn't fight something I couldn't see. So flight was really what was happening. And then I would freeze if I saw more things in the wet cement, and it scared the life out of me. So, but like now as adult Marissa, executive dysfunctioning shows up in a different way. For me, it's like if something is a looming task or I find it boring or not engaging, I will wait until the exact last minute to do it. And then I get to the point where I know I have to get it done, especially for work. I know I have to get it done. And then I get myself so stressed out because I waited till the 11th hour. But then that's like, it kicks in my motivation. I'm like, I have to get it done. There's no other choice. And then I've not given myself room for mistake. And that's where executive dysfunction shows up for me. But what does that look like for you as an adult?
Um, I, 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 I relate to that on a lot of massive levels, but yeah, as an adult, I think because I love executive functioning so much now, I think the emotional regulation piece for me is the one that I'm really working on the most. Where like I I find myself to immediately in like crisis or challenging situations to have to stop myself from having an emotional reaction first.
Mm,
And I usually can, and I'm usually like, okay, you're about to react, and that's ridiculous because if your end goal is peace and achieving peace, which really is my like ultimate goal in life, like here on out,
I see that for you.
I
Yeah.
just it's because of all the crisis and challenges that life has thrown my way. And so for me, that's the hardest part is making sure that I'm not emotionally reacting. And sometimes it's to defend others. Sometimes I don't typically do it to defend myself. I do it in a way that, like may present that way. And I'm aware of that. And I'm working on that too. But a lot of the times I realize that having that impulsive emotional dysregulation in the like split second that I allow it to happen is because I'm not in my best. I'm going back to what you were talking about, like my base brain form or like basic instinct. And I know that that's not who I am. So I've had to practice a lot in those situations, especially with my children. Like when one of my children falls, I am like, oh my God. But on the outside, I'm like, oh, are you hurt or are you sad? Like what's going on? Like show me where it hurts, or do you need a hug? What are you needing in that moment? As opposed to like,
Right, because if you react like that, then their reaction is going to be even bigger.
right.
Yeah,
And what
absolutely.
you
There's that
just
modeling
said,
piece.
yeah, well, what you just said though is like it's something else I've learned that if whoever gets emotionally dysregulated first in a conversation or a situation, it automatically rises. And to me, that's just not worth it anymore. And it's the
Sure.
antithesis of what my goal always is. And it doesn't always work out. But
Well, I
I re-
I get I get dysregulated, emotionally dysregulated when, like, to your point, when it impacts people I care about. So if those
yes,
people who I see, like, or if it questions my authenticity or my self
yes,
purpose, then I
yeah,
don't do well emotionally regulating. With that said, I've had a little bit more practice, and
right,
a lot of times it's more people don't care about me in the way that I worry or sometimes think that they do. Like they're everyone is in the best way self-involved. Like they don't think about me the way I think about me or other people, and so when I worry about their other perceptions, that's why when I check myself and can emotionally regulate, my encounter or engagement with people shifts. But as an example, recently, a decision was made by my company to take away benefits, spousal exclusion for cost saving reasons. That was very
right,
challenging for me because my well-being is dependent on the well-being of my family. And so I definitely could not regulate right away with that news. Since then, I'm choosing a different path forward and trying to control what's in my control. But in reality, that's a really challenging situation. And so, a lot of what you were talking about, it makes a ton of sense to me. And like you do for your kids when they fall, you try not to have, you can think it internally, but the way in which you present yourself is really what's gonna, how do you get to that end goal? Like what do you want to see out of the situation? And by approaching it with the executive functioning and emotional regulation and reducing your impulsivity to freak out, that really
Right.
helps.
Well, it's interesting because you just made me think of I love Stephen Covey's Seven Habits. I used to use it a lot um when I was in the classroom, and one of them is begin with the end in mind. And I think that's the best way to explain how I make sure I'm not going into dysfunction mode, and I'm functioning at my highest level. And I think you had asked me before, like where executive functioning has taken place in my life, and I know that I was never told about executive dysfunction, but I know that I had it. Like growing up, I knew I was all over the place. Like I knew that I did best when I was playing sports, or when I was writing music, or when I was able to be my authentic self. And I've talked about this a lot. Like I have this jolly old British monkey in my head. Like he's the one running my life. And I know that it's weird because
What a lucky
I'm
guy.
female, but my monkey is male. But like he's got a top hat, he's got like spectacles, he's got like
Dashing.
he's in like a top coat. Like I love him. He runs things up there. And sometimes he's just this jolly good fellow drinking tea, and all that. And on other days he's running around throwing tantrums, like throwing books off shelves, wreaking havoc. And as a child, I wish someone had sat down with me and said, you have some gaps in your executive functioning, or you have executive dysfunction, because I think I was labeled as a lot of different things when none of it was true. And in reality, I just felt like I didn't have control over my brain or myself. And I think that that is something that I have heard from almost every single learner I've encountered, every single person I've encountered, every parent in it's amazing that that is such a relatable thing to people. So I think
Sure.
labels should be gone, and I don't label myself really as much anymore, because I just think that it puts you in a box. And I believe that boxes, while they can sometimes make you feel good, are most of the time societally built and driven and are not good for you in your mental health. But I just needed some extra time and care with someone. And so what I realized in my work, as an executive functioning coach, but also in my own life, that signs of executive function are like, or dysfunction are like being easily frustrated, like getting to a task and like just not necessarily giving up, but just being frustrated very easily. Um, I think inability to complete tasks, like if I would get to a place where I just felt like I couldn't do it, or somebody told me that I wasn't capable, I would just be like, eh. And now, like, I don't give up on anything, because I know I was able to identify what the issue was. So I was able to do the opposite. And like struggling with multi-step directions, I used to have such a hard time with word problems. And when I realized if I broke it down into pieces, I could solve it, it had nothing to do with my ability academically. It had everything to do with how I needed to organize the information. And it would seem
Got
like I
it.
was forgetful, but I have, me, I remember everything in detail.
Yes, you're right. We do. Like I joke about how you remember like unique details almost to the date, and I know what isn't quite an eidetic memory, but it's like there's an emotional tie to it, which is why you remember it. And
Yes.
but you know, I want to offer. I am sorry that you had to go through all of these experiences, but I really want to commend the fact that rather than have history repeat itself, you chose to learn from it and switch your perspective and empower youth. And as a learning mentor, like even for me, I don't even think as your sister, I really appreciated everything that you were going through, and I hope I wasn't a significant contributor to all of these mislabeling. But wow. And as you were talking, like I thought of a challenging experience that I had, which I don't know if specifically you remember this, but perhaps you did, because I know you joke about how I am mom and dad's shining light, like could never do any wrong. And we talked about how it was really compliant, but like in a challenging situation for me, where you were describing some of your executive dysfunctioning and ways in which you knew that it was not authentic to who you were, but you didn't know what you didn't know, so you couldn't vocalize that it was an organization issue or things. Well, for me, I can recall a time where I felt very peer pressured. So I was working in a summer job, and I was hanging out with some of the people that I worked with. We were all under the age of 21. I particularly did not drink because I had driven, and knowing what I knew of how our father's family grew up and alcoholism and all of that and how that played a factor. Plus, again, the fact that I was driving, and there was an accident with these five, unfortunately, these five girls from a local community had passed away via a drunk driving accident. So that was really acute in my mind. But I was still with people, and they were still drinking underage. And this girl who we had offered to sleep over because our house was a lot closer to work than hers, and she had been drinking, and I didn't want her getting behind a wheel. I had offered to drive her, but she had all this extra alcohol, and I felt weird about taking it home with us. But again, I was her ride, and so I transported alcohol in my car just because it was hers and she had bought it. And it felt wrong to me for a lot of reasons. Like, there was a reason I had not been drinking, so why should it be my responsibility? But, I didn't want to put a damper on the evening, and I was enjoying hanging out with people, and they didn't pressure me to drink. They honored my decision not to. But anyway, this was not my car. I was studying in college to be a teacher. The next day, Mom came home from working out, and I guess the trunk had got left open. I think I had opened it so that the girl would take the alcohol out and not leave it in the car, but that didn't happen. So Mom was getting back home from working out, and she approached me and she's like, Marissa, what did you get up to last night? Is there anything I should know about? And I had this instinct that I had potentially been caught out. And so I had two options. I had, lie or tell the truth. And I had already done enough that was inauthentic to how I was feeling or what I should have done. And so I came clean. And yes, I did get the whole, you could have gotten in so much trouble. What if you had gotten pulled over? You could have impacted your capacity to get a teaching license, yada, yada, yada. All things I had already known were risks. But again, that was that impulsivity piece and not being true to myself and, going against what I thought was right. And it didn't matter that I didn't drink. I still made a bad choice, and I had to own up to it. And the fallout from losing our parents' trust and them being disappointed in me, it was probably even worse of a punishment than had I lost my license. Obviously not go to jail. That would have been worse. But like, lost my license, they took the car away. It was like years of work that I had built into establishing trust with our parents eliminated, dissolved in one night because of a stupid decision. And so for me, that challenging situation, that is how I started to build up executive functioning, and that is how I started building up resilience. I am glad I chose to be honest, and it required vulnerability, and it required me owning the actions that came about from my decision. But yeah, it did not feel good, and I learned a lot from that experience.
I didn't know all of that. I didn't know all of that. All I remember was yelling, and I remember this was like so unlike you. You never got in trouble. You never did anything wrong. I didn't know all those
Rebel
other
Marissa.
pieces. All I knew is that we were on a 6-hour car ride to Connecticut shortly after for a holiday, and no one was talking and you were in a ton of trouble. That's all I knew. But
Didn't
I
it feel
so
good to have the heat
understand.
off you? You're welcome.
Oh man, our younger sister and I were in the back seat and we were like, this is great. I mean,
For
we felt awful,
everyone
don't
but
get me wrong,
me.
but
No,
I
I
didn't
understand.
realize like all the pieces of that situation. Like, first off, thank you for sharing that because I think a lot of people can relate to different pieces of that story, like the peer pressure piece, the going against your authenticity and then kind of questioning whether or not you were making the right decision or questioning the safe decision and making the safe decision when it wasn't easy. And also knowing that you were trying not to be impulsive, but it was a little bit impulsive of you. But I think the interesting part that I'm getting to too is like, did you know that your brain stops growing in size during adolescence? But it doesn't actually fully mature until our mid to late 20s.
Oh, no,
So
I didn't know that.
it's earlier for male or for females than males, but I think it's important when we're thinking about learning anything that while you said this too, while we're fully responsible for our actions, because we're going to have to deal with the fallout, we're going to have to deal with the reaction of any situation. It's
Sure.
easier to learn and develop skills when we're younger so that when our brains are fully mature, we're able to function at a higher capacity. And um I think about the situation that you were in, and I think again it was probably very relatable to a lot of people. And I think about the different places where you were able to make decisions. And I think the interesting part about executive functioning and executive dysfunction is even in situations where you can make the best decisions, we don't always do that. And we did talk about impulsivity, but I
Yeah.
think the other piece to all of this too is, um, as somebody who I was constantly told like, oh, you always need to learn the hard way. I am really good now. I heard you like cackle a little bit. Yeah, we both know this about me. But I know that I am really good in a crisis situation. I am always good
Yeah,
at
you are.
overcoming challenges now because of what I was told to do when I went opposite. And I wasn't able to make the best decisions for a variety of reasons when I was younger, but I feel like because of the practice and because of knowing where I was and being able to identify, like, okay, I made a bad decision here. Why did I make a bad decision? Let's reflect on it. Let's make sure we don't do it again. Um, I think because of those situations and because I've been able to practice these situations and practice my executive functioning skills where I can be intentional with it, I am really good in a crisis or in a challenging situation, and I'm good at helping other people in crisis in challenging situations because of this.
You,
And I so
you
appreciate you
definitely are.
sharing that. Oh,
Well,
thanks.
and not that my example, that example was a crisis. That was definitely just a challenge, but you are really great in a crisis situation. In fact, like I frequently think about all the things that you've had to encounter with your health and how for a long time you were gaslit by doctors because you knew your body better than they did and they were telling you that all the tests showed nothing wrong, but you're clearly evidently something wrong. And I think
Yes.
about that because unfortunately, I have had to deal with crisis situations. So, as a parent, my older son had a febrile seizure. And that was a really scary experience for me because you know what your child or people who are close to you, you know what their behavior is like. And watching him go through something and feeling so helpless in that moment. But I have seen how you handle crisis situations. And I have been in awe of the resilience that you show because you have experience with this. And so at the time that this happened, I was able to stay in an executive functioning state because of the experience. Mr. Miyagi really helped me out that day. I was able to call 911. I was able to get him help. I knew what to watch out for. I knew how to hold him so that he could stay safe and eliminate the risk. It I had to keep myself calm and help keep calm those around me. and it was not a fun experience, but definitely one that, because of previous experiences, because of people like you who I've had as role models and seeing how you've approached that situation, I was able to remain calm. And it just, I learned from others who were in crisis so that by the time I encountered one, I was not totally without rationality. And I learned also in that crisis that helped me develop some more resilience, because it required me to rely on my resources, and it required me to keep a level head. And as much as I wanted to freak out, as much as I wanted to cry, when my son came to, I was the rock for him. I was the advocate. So I needed to keep in that state of mind so that I could learn from this should it ever happen again. So that if anything were to happen with other children or other loved ones, but I was able to do that only because I've seen other people do things like that, and I've learned from past experiences through reflection. And it wasn't the first time. Like you were talking about preparing for the end in mind. Unfortunately, sometimes my brain does go to what's the worst case scenario and how would I approach it if that happened. It's like why there's shows like The Walking Dead exist, because like, oh my God, what if this weird scenario threw out? How would we approach the situation? And like, I'm sort of grateful that humanity is as creative as we are, because like if a zombie apocalypse did happen, I have a whole an anthology to go watch and use as a survival tactic. So, you know, I'm just offering, like, for me, that's kind of what crisis looks like. But what I'm going to push that back to you. How does it look for you learning through crisis?
Oh no, I just like a zombie apocalypse. That's going on in my head.
Does it? There you go.
Learning through crisis.
Or if aliens attack, even, right? Like we have that too. And it's not just like weird green aliens. It's like if they look human, we know what to do. Yeah, right. We have that, or we have like if a glowing ball falls, or if we have these weird, yeah, or if we have these weird alien creatures come down and they only are attracted to noise. I know exactly what to do in that situation. Thanks, John Krasinski. So yeah, no, it's just
I know how to handle gremlins now. You know what I mean?
Like, right? You know what I'm saying? Don't feed them after midnight. Hello, there would have been no movie. If you just followed the directions, there would have been no movie if I was the kid that got the gremlins. They would all have stayed Furbies. Just saying. I know how to follow directions.
Yeah, I just... I don't know. Crisis. I think it kind of goes back to, I mean, I do think 98% of the time I'm good in crisis, kind of because I was gaslit for so long when it came to certain things in my life, or I was mislabeled, that I just feel like I've almost always lived in that zone. And it hasn't been until like maybe the last, I don't know, 15 years that I've really been able to teach my brain a different way. And I think that a lot of that comes down from when you go through something, you either kind of think of it as like an invisible string. Like you either kind of continue to take a lesson from it or take some learnings from it, or you don't. And you just keep moving forward. And it tags along with you until you sit down and you figure it out. Or it comes up in a different way. And for me, that's kind of where I became a reflective person. Is because it always catches up with you if you don't sit with it. So I think sometimes reflection comes from, like the idea of practicing reflection and becoming a reflective person is you have to look at the bad to figure out what you can take away from it. And I also think something that I just recently, I've heard of the word grit before, and I've told my kids like, get gritty. Especially when it came to like prostate testing in particular. You know, and telling them like it, you know, the results don't matter in the grand scheme. This is one day, one moment, one period of time where it's taking a snapshot of what other people are identifying as your academic intelligence. It is not an indicator of the rest of your life. It's not an indicator of anything else. It's just showing you a snapshot moment of what you are able to show what you know. But I talk about grit, and I think I just recently read that the number one predictor of success in life is your grit, like, and your ability to be gritty. And I think that that's something that we should talk about next time, because there's so much to grit and resilience. And we've talked about resilience a little bit before, but I think talking about how to get gritty and what that looks like in learning, I think that would be really valuable.
That's a cool concept. I look forward to chatting about that. Thanks.
All right. Get down to the nitty gritty next time.
Great. Talk to you then.
That was a bad joke. Okay. Talk to you then. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Everything is Learning. We're so glad you joined us.
Be sure to subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.